Hey everyone, we are live now on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Welcome everyone to the lunchtime learning session with Launch. Today we're talking about the power of customer reviews and how they can really kind of supercharge and create effectiveness in your advertising. But first of all, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Jay, I'm the founder of Launch. I host these things on a Friday normally with my team. And this is Joe. Joe, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, happy Friday, or if you're watching this back, I hope you're having a good day. I'm Joe, I head up the experimentation team at Launch. So the experimentation team, we do lots of testing in both ad campaigns and also on websites, but also we do loads of research as well, which is what we're talking about today.
Awesome. So Joe joined us, it's over 2 years ago now, Joe, isn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Someone asked the other day, it's about 2.5 years ago, which feels like longer in a good way.
Amazing. And at Launch, we call ourselves the Happy Performance Marketing Agency. We're driving new customer acquisition and retention for our clients through paid media on Meta, on Spotify, on Google, on Microsoft. And what Joe and the team do is make sure that we're really embedding that test and learn approach to things, really having an experimental mindset, because often it's those marginal gains that you can get that will help you beat the competition, that will help you grow in what is a tough climate, especially for retail and e-commerce at the moment. I think the latest stats were that the clothing sector was 9% down, yet one of our biggest clothing retailers is 30% up year on year. So it is about making sure that we embed that experimentation. So I want to kind of dive a little bit into this topic for today. Tell me a little bit about the benefits that you see, Joe, in customer reviews to what we do.
Yeah, so it's a topic that I love talking about more than ever because of the technology that allows us to do this now using AI and large language models. But I mean, reviews have always been important for clients. They've been really crucial for social proof mostly. So most people are looking for some kind of shortcut for reliability or credibility. And that's what reviews provide, especially in large volumes. So Trustpilot or Google My Business or FIFOreviews.io, loads of different platforms out there. And they've always been important, but it's only now or recently that we've been able to use all of that data in such a way as to extract all of the insights from it. And lots of our clients have sort of jumped on this, and knowing that it's a really valuable piece of research for them, but also for other teams in their business.
I found something really interesting the other day. We were doing a roundtable breakfast with Melt Digital, who specialize in SEO, and we obviously specialize in PPC. And we were talking about the importance of reviews and the customer voice, but they were talking about it with their SEO hats on. In fact, I think I've got a direct quote here from Bart, their managing director, that reviews are actually influencing ChatGPT and the large language models to be able, for those large language models to understand what the brand is about, and that customer voice part of it, making sure that it is in that customer's language. So there are sometimes some unintended benefits that I hadn't even considered before. And so, you know, this is touching all kinds of different departments here. Who is this in particular relevant to?
So it's a really interesting point because, of course, as a performance marketing agency, we're approaching this, or the lens that we usually approach research from is understanding the customer so that we can better serve marketing messages to them, right? So that we can, you know, improve that acquisition journey, but also the retention journey. But what's been really interesting is, having done lots of these different review mining projects now, is that the almost like unintended consequence of that in a positive way is that it's provided loads of insight for other teams within the business, which also touches on the customer journey. So teams like retention teams or teams in charge of email or ECRM campaigns, it's really helpful for them because they can understand what's keeping customers coming back and also different segments of customers. Also product teams, customer experience teams, customer service teams, basically any team that has an interface with the customer at some point throughout that journey, which really is kind of most teams really nowadays. So the brands that consider themselves to be very customer centric will really benefit from this the most, I think, and hopefully that's most brands these days.
And why do you think now it's something that you've become particularly passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I guess have happened. First of all, technically speaking, from a technological perspective, AI and using tools like Gemini or ChatGPT or other LLMs, what they're really good at is breaking down or understanding huge quantities of data and then spotting trends throughout that. So if we had tried to do this exercise 5 years ago and we had said there's 10,000 reviews, maybe 100,000 reviews here, individually go through them all, label them, and then segment them, it would just be an impossible task. It would take us far too long to do that kind of decoding and coding. But LLMs can do it so quickly that it essentially has made something that was impossible possible for us. And the additional benefit is that brands have been collecting reviews for upwards of 10 years sometimes. So that they can be sat on what is, tens of thousands of reviews, which are just ready or sat there, but haven't really been fully utilized yet. And so that's why I'm really excited about it, because most brands don't really know what they've got and what they're sat on. But also because of what you mentioned earlier about it being really tough market conditions, highly competitive, trust and brand credibility are more important than ever. So speaking the customer's language in a credible way is really important. And doing this is a way of allowing you to achieve that.
Absolutely. I should point out to the people watching live, please do ask questions as we go along. We're live on both YouTube and on LinkedIn. I should be able to see those comments come up. And if we don't get a moment to cover them, we'll reply to you afterwards. If at any point you do need to get in touch with us, our contact details are on the screen now, and I will share again them later. But let's make this as interactive as possible for those that are watching live. Joe, I think you've got some slides you can take us through that you talk to customers, to our particular customers and clients about. Shall we kick off there?
Yeah, let's jump in. I'll just rewind a few slides here. Okay, cool. So when we're talking about review mining, it's sometimes easy to, there's lots of different types of mining in terms of the digital world now. You hear it around crypto and Bitcoin and stuff like that. But really what we're talking about specifically is only looking at those different reviews platforms where you might, where you house your reviews at the moment. But this is the problem that we're trying to solve here, is that ultimately what we're trying to do with paid media campaigns, but also, to your point, Jay, at any point through that acquisition journey, it could be organic SEO as well, is trying to create content that is relevant to our audience. But that is really difficult to do when you're without data. So most of the time we can interview people, which is really a really good source of that data. We can do surveys, but customer reviews have up till now been quite an I guess an undiscovered aspect of looking at that kind of data, that gold mine of data. So like I said earlier, that gold mine of data that we're sat on has been up to this point kind of inaccessible, but it's really powerful for guiding ad creative, ad messaging that we can use in our experimentation program. So a lot of this insight that we're generating at the moment has been used to almost like influence and power the experimentation pipeline that we have for our clients, so that we can start testing with some of this really good insights. So as I mentioned earlier, that kind of volume of reviews is really important. Ideally looking at thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of those customer reviews. And what that allows us to do at such scale is uncover themes and sentiments that will otherwise kind of be hidden from us if we're just looking at them on an individual or case-by-case basis. So I think, I mentioned earlier some of the most famous or most popular platforms. You've got FIFO, you've got Trustpilot. Reviews.io, Google My Business, but there are loads of other platforms out there. Some of them are more proprietary, or they're not necessarily third party. They could be ones that you have yourself. No matter where they're stored, you can do this kind of exercise. And some of the other outcomes that, obviously, apart from what I mentioned earlier around generating high performing ad creative, is things like being able to create really good, strong headlines for emails for your retention campaigns, or if you're trying to understand how to actually better serve your customers at a location level. So if you're a bricks and mortars retailer, a lot of the insights that you'll get back from this is how can we improve the in-store experience? How can we improve the delivery experience? There's lots of secondary benefits from doing this kind of research that you might not have considered before. So a kind of live example of what this might look like. So this is a review on the left-hand side, which has a really clear, identifiable customer need. So this is a pet food company, and one of the customers had said that the reason they chose this brand was because it suits their pet's sensitive stomach, which is maybe a customer need that you might not necessarily identify at scale unless you were doing this kind of research, which can then go on to inform some of the headline copy or body copy for a search ad or a social ads, or even a landing page. So that's the kind of secret of this, is that it can uncover some of those hidden gems.
I think I've seen an example that you've had before. It was one of our clothing brands, and it was someone who'd left a comment saying that I love the fact that this dress has got pockets. And then you surfaced, you realized that through the work you were doing with them, you surfaced that in some ad creative, and did a split test, an A/B test between that and the original creative, and it won by quite a long way, didn't it?
It did. Yeah. So those literally, not always copy and paste, but as close as we can to using or borrowing the customer's language is the best way of us making sure that it's going to resonate with them. And so we'll uncover a trend or a theme, and then we'll back that up with real quotes. And so for any of these themes that we uncover, we're not just trying to understand what the actual issue is that we're solving or the problem the customer needs, but we also want to make sure that we're representing the customer well by using real life quotes. And so some of the most compelling creative that we've come up with has been finding those real customer needs and then backing it up with a real customer quote. And then that often will be similar to why people see 5-star reviews or 4-star reviews as being really compelling. It just works. It's social proof. It's another form of social proof in a way. So just to dive into some of the detail of how this actually works and what we're doing when we're looking at customer reviews, you might assume it just looking at the kind of star rating, whether it's 1 star to 5 stars, but actually there's a bit more going on. So I'm just going to break that down a bit. So we look at both star ratings, but then also the theme and the sentiment of that review. And sometimes they might be different. So you might have a 5-star review that actually has some negative feedback in the actual content of the review and the sentiment they have, or the other way around. There might be a 1-star review or a 2-star review that actually does have some good aspects to it. So we try and separate those out and then understand, first of all, what are the main themes that might be coming through for a retailer. That could be the quality of the product. It could be the speed of delivery. It could be the returns process. There's lots of different things it could be. The proportion of how many of those themes are represented in those reviews, and then what the kind of sentiment is towards that. So positive, negative, neutral. But when it gets really interesting is where you can look at those trends over time. So how are things trending over years, over months? Are we getting, are people's opinions of our products going up, going down? And then you can look at that from a seasonal perspective. And this is the kind of stuff that you just wouldn't be able to get if you were doing it manually. Humans just can't really see some of the granularity of those seasonal trends over time. That can only be uncovered when you're looking at vast quantities of these data.
And it can help remove biases as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So it can definitely overturn or, turn upside down some assumptions we might have about why certain products are popular or which products are popular. But for one of our travel clients, we uncovered some really interesting seasonal trends. And then also, in terms of whether their customers were generally happier during the summer months or the winter months and why, but then also by country, by region, which countries or regions were most popular. And we found some interesting findings. One of them was that holidays or trips that included multi-country stops, they tended to have slightly less good reviews because there was often logistical trouble with getting from one location to another, things that you wouldn't necessarily have picked up if you were just looking at those on an individual basis, but it's really useful to know. And then lastly, demographics. So where we have data around the product SKU or the product category, regional differences. So if you've got bricks and mortar stores around the country, it might be really useful to know if there's any trends or differences in opinion and sort of sentiment by region, and how that could then be reflected in your regional approach. And that doesn't just count for the UK, it could be further afield. We could look at different countries or different regions around the world. So there's lots of different ways to sort of split the data, and it can get really, really granular and really interesting. And all of this ultimately should be informing our view or our opinion of our ideal customer profile. So how much does this contradict or inform or agree with our current understanding of the ideal customer? And we often have to sort of update our understanding of the customer, having done a lot of this research, because it gives us such confidence in the data that we can say this is pretty robust. You've got thousands of reviews, and if that's informing or updating our understanding, we should sort of reflect that in how we understand or talk about the customer as well.
Yeah. I find it quite interesting. I think you've got a quote in a minute about how avoiding the silos of, by having the product development team, the CRM team, and then the performance marketing manager all looking at this report, you then get some unity between those departments. Definitely.
So we're having presented this or done this kind of project with a few of our clients now. One of them we initially did a presentation with, and then it was shared throughout the whole company because they thought this needs to be seen by everyone. And then another one of our clients, they said, this is really interesting. I think you need to do a presentation to the whole company. So we're going in and doing a kind of town hall with them to present, because it really is relevant to everyone who works with the customer. And then just to give you some numbers, this is sort of some examples of the kinds of volume of data that we can deal with. And ideally, like I said earlier, I think you want to be looking at least 1,000 reviews, and then up to 100,000. Past that, it can get quite difficult in terms of the volume. And then over time lapse, or time spans, we tend to have more heavily weight the recent reviews. So if we're looking at a 12-year time span, we might give more sort of, I guess, weighting to the reviews that are in the last few years. But that gives us really interesting amount of data for us to do time analysis, so we can see how those themes have trended over time and whether they're going in the right direction. And so, as you mentioned, there's some quotes here which we really love to see, because all we're trying to do and everything we do in our team is to try and inform and improve that performance of the sort of the ads that we're showing, but also the website as well, the acquisition journey. And when we hear feedback like this, it's so lovely to hear, especially when we hear that the secondary benefit is that we've helped them write some email subject lines, which was really good, because we never thought that would be the case having done this, but it's kind of one of those happy accidents, I suppose.
Yeah, because it's helping messaging hierarchy and understanding of what's resonating and what's of the moment as well.
Yeah, it kind of it allows us to think from a quantitative perspective. We've got really good evidence that these themes have the highest of the highest importance to customers. Say for example, it could be product quality, and that could be it could be lots of different types of product quality, but that then might there's a really good argument to say that should be at the top of our messaging hierarchy, followed by the next thing that was most important to those customers. But then also it allows us to look at what that might be from a messaging point at all different stages of the customer journey as well. So quite quickly with this information, you can start to lay out what that messaging strategy should be by audience, by customer stage as well. And so it's been incredibly helpful for the teams when writing ad copy and coming up with creative test ideas. And a question sometimes I get asked is, who is this relevant for? Who could do this kind of research? And really, it's any brand who is, well, first of all, you have to be, obviously open to and interested in what the customer has to say. And that's, I would hope, like I said, most people will be thinking customer centric now. And if you're not, it's really a missed opportunity. But then a minimum of 1,000 reviews, which I should also think is most brands now who've been running customer review programs for at least a couple of years. And then also, this is particularly useful for any brand that's working in a highly competitive space. So that, that could be a retail space, especially now. Those kinds of industries are, commoditized, and there's immense pressure in terms of competition. So knowing what makes you unique, your USPs and your key differentiators, is more important than ever. So this is a really good way of putting some solid data behind what those differentiators are.
Well, I mean, for brand teams, they have their tone of voice, their ICPs, who is this brand meant to be for, and what do we consider the USPs to be? This is then seeing, is that resonating and being heard by the customer? Are they speaking back those same those same brand values? And what's quite interesting is last week at South by Southwest, we were doing a panel session where we had Fleur from the Value Engineers, who are brand strategist, Amy, our client services director, Keir, who's a marketing consultant and is working a lot with brands at the moment, trying to help them grow, finding agency partners to do that. And the conversation that came out from that is that often you have brand teams and performance teams siloed from each other, separate agency ecosystem, and often it's therefore hard to understand, is the brand equity increasing over time? Are the brand values being understood by the customer? Are they still resonating with the customer? So to me, yes, I am really keen that our clients and our partners that we work with do an exercise like this so that our advertising can be more effective. But the end product of this could be a much more closely aligned marketing ecosystem within a brand, because you're putting at the customer voice at the heart of all of that decision making, that you're bringing them back into the conversation at a really great price point. I know that that we've been doing this from between 6,000 and 20,000, depending on the number of reviews and the learning library that we're dealing with. But it's the price point is not price prohibitive to immediately get this started.
Especially when you consider how many teams and departments it's relevant to and can benefit from it within any given business. It's kind of crosses lots of different department lines. And like you said, it is a really good way of getting everyone around a single table and opening up that discussion. And, I guess the worry that I hear about lots more and more these days, especially in the conversation around AI, is that when with brands sometimes relying a bit too much on AI to guide their creative or their ad copy, is that we're going to lose that voice of the customer, or that it will just become, like beige or bland, and that it will all sort of sound similar. This is the antidote to that. This is how you keep the customer at the heart of that, while still also using AI, but using it in such a way that gets you closer to what customers really think and what they're saying, and then actually, backing up what your hypotheses are with solid data as well. So it's a performance-driven but human-centered insights. That's kind of how I think about it.
And the barrier to entry is low, because this data already exists on all of your review platforms. You're not having to go out with a new customer survey. You're not having to get all of the stakeholders signing off on this. The information's all there. In fact, one of the members of your team is wanting to back that up. Do not sleep. reviews. And
Yes.
Josh is obviously one of the executioners of this work, so he's clearly very passionate about it too. I've got a question here from Nancy. Let's see if I can bring it up. So with this same method of pulling out key customer comments, i.e. the sensitive stomach dog food example, still work for the travel industry? It feels hard to find the balance of a lot of reviews talk about life-changing experience, but you don't want to use that exact language as to not overpromise or set unrealistic expectations.
Yes, it's a good question around like which industries are relevant for this. If you're not offering a product per se, it's more of an experience. But to that exact example of the travel industry, we have actually run this kind of research for one of our clients who works in the travel industry, and they found it to be really useful for uncovering which aspects of the experience do customers value the most. And for them, it wasn't just the actual organization of the trip, but it was things like the knowledge of the guides, the quality of the food and the location and the hotels, things that you might usually expect, but then it's the extra insights that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like I mentioned earlier, things around seasonality and how those change throughout the year and the reasons for that, but then also the products or the category types, the countries, how they differ by country as well. It gives you really granular understanding of what people are saying that like I said, if you were just looking at a bunch of reviews in a kind of list fashion, it would be so hard to decipher or to get an understanding of the differences of between those different reviews and what they're all saying. So I think in terms of how you play that back, if we just take that example again with the travel industry, in terms of what we would recommend when we're talking about their kind of customer reviews, there's both rational and emotional reasons to buy. So it would help us to understand both the rational but also the emotive reasons. So the life-changing experience is still definitely a valid message to go with if that's what customers are saying. And then because from an emotional perspective, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for transformation and being challenged and to grow. And that's still true. That's still true because it's coming through in the reviews. So I think
you can use it as a customer quote rather than we're promising you a life-changing experience. It's Jane from Bolton has says that it's a life-changing experience. Talk to me a little bit about with all of our clients, but with the travel client in particular, how there's a messaging hierarchy. You go back and this forms a learning library, doesn't it? That is
so there's a certain number of things that we might uncover that we would they're just jobs to be done. So if for example, if the travel industry, it could be really practical, pragmatic things about maps or directions, the actual experience of the holiday, which can be useful for us to pass on, but they don't need to be tested because it's kind of like it's an obvious fix. But then there are other messaging or creative changes that we would suggest they do, but are still worth testing. And those test or experiment ideas would go on to form our what we call a learning library, which is kind of a backlog of test ideas that we want to run with that client. And so that then informs, for example, for the next 3 months, which tests do we want to run across our ad campaigns, and which tests do we want to run across the website. That's almost fuel for that. So we'll use that to inform that pipeline, and this isn't necessarily a one and done thing. So I think most clients they might be sat on 10,000 ish reviews, and that's where you're going to get the most benefit out of doing this kind of project. But it's not to say that that's when it's finished, because of course in the next 12 months you're going to get thousands more reviews. So the good thing, I think, is that you get most benefit out of doing it that one time, but then you might want to top it up again in a year and see, like I said, how those themes are trending. Are customers becoming more price sensitive? Is what they value from your brand changing? Have you been able to move the needle on some of the problems that we picked up in the first time when we looked at this? It can be something that actually, develops over time.
Absolutely. And the jobs to be done is a really interesting one, because often people know that they need to be investing in their website. Not everyone has got a constant CRO program running, or a CRO team, but it gives you informed opinions about additional information you can have on product pages, on destination pages, depending which sector you're in. And I'm passionate because I think that we need to get more human as everything with technology evolves, and we keep talking about users, and I don't know, it's not so much bounce rates now, but engagement rates, but they're all potential customers, and putting the customer at the heart of what we do is super important. In fact, a quick question has come in. I'm gonna allow it. We're technically 30 seconds over. I'm going to allow it. Okay. Old friend of launch, Simon. Oh, Simon Lockyer. Hopefully it's up there.
Hey, Simon.
Do certain review sites, Trustpilot, carry more weight than others when it comes to using testimonials in ads? We usually include quotes in our creatives, but I'm wondering if name dropping specific platforms, including logos, actually adds credibility or makes a real difference.
Well, it's a really good question, and I know that there have been studies out there, and it depends who you speak to, though, because if you speak to each of those platforms, they will contest that theirs is the most trusted, it's the most credible platform. So I've not seen any sort of credible third-party data or third-party analysis on that myself. So I can't say whether there is one that's the standout platform from any kind of sort of objective research. But what I would say is that it's not necessarily the platform in terms of getting valid results out of doing customer review mining. It's not necessarily the platform that matters so much as how many of those different dimensions you can include in the research. So as I mentioned earlier, it's the better kind of research comes from having timestamps, but then also ideally which country or location that review was left in. The product category or SKU would also help. And then so those kinds of additional data labels will really help us dig into the granularity of what those differences are.
Yeah.
But you can get that through lots of different platforms. It doesn't necessarily matter which one. But then when you're presenting those reviews back in ad creative, we haven't really, I can't say that we've really seen a huge difference in terms of, and we don't, I think it's actually very rare that we would put the customer review platform within the ad creative. On the website, yes, but within the ad creative, probably not so much. As long as there's kind of, it's obvious that it is a quote using speech marks or quotation marks. So I don't know if I can properly answer that question, Simon, but I hope that's good enough.
But I know what you would do if that was one of your hypotheses. You'd test it, Joe, wouldn't you? Yeah. And you'd try it out. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to test it in something like Google because there would be a there's IP around using the term trademark around using the term Trustpilot. So I would imagine that would probably get banned. But in Meta or in creative ads, that's potentially possible. But it would be one of the questions, the hypotheses that could be put forward for testing.
Well, just on that, we are actually running a test on one of our clients' websites around, it's a classic, including Trustpilot in the USP bar at the top of the website, and it is actually performing much better. So, it just goes to show that it does work.
Absolutely. Well, this was a really interactive session. Thank you so much, Joe. This will be kept on our YouTube channel. So if you know that this might benefit someone else in your team, please do go ahead and share it. If you've got any questions that we've not managed to cover, drop them in the LinkedIn comments or the YouTube comments and we'll get back to you. And just a reminder that we have got some really awesome resources over on our website. We did a brilliant conference, if I don't say so myself, back in March called the CMO's Guide to Performance Marketing, where we had Pinterest talking. Joe did a great talk all about, Jurassic Park got a mention. So and about how you embed a experimentation culture within your marketing team. So thank you so much, Joe. I always love doing these sessions.
Absolute pleasure.
And if anyone wants to get in touch, it's contact@launchonline.co.uk. Thanks everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.